just so you know, Wayne, Oakland, Genesee, Macomb, Washtenaw, and Houghton County represented with these 5 people. And all of us are victims in probate. So you being out of Bay County, we're happy what you're doing, but we want you to do what you're doing in Bay County and all of our counties.
I appreciate that. But let me start by saying thank you for the invitation and for the interest in the guardianship diversion work that I've been doing. And I'll also kind of, as a lawyer, give a disclaimer. So I am here as myself, an individual. I do not, what I'm saying here does not necessarily represent the views of the Michigan Elder Justice Initiative, Legal Services of Eastern Michigan, Bay County Department on Aging, or, anybody else for that matter. But I am a civil legal aid attorney, and I have been serving vulnerable adults as a generalist in the Great Lakes Bay region since August of 2014. Yes, there's a lot of room for improvement in the guardianship system, not only in Bay County and in Michigan, but all across the country. So Allison Herschel at the Michigan Elder Justice Initiative obviously knows of that need as well. And so she wrote a grant through the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, which I had never heard of before I started working on this project, and was awarded initially a 1-year one-year kind of exploratory grant to try and put together a proposal. And that's when I came on. So I started in March of 2023. And then so during that year, I was learning a lot about guardianship, both in Michigan and around the country. And I actually went up to Houghton. So Houghton was one of the courts that I explored as a potential pilot site. Also Macomb County. Of course, we were looking everywhere, and there were some counties that were just too big. Like Oakland was just, and Wayne were kind of like too much for an initial pilot. But we had kind of narrowed down the list to kind of 20, and then we narrowed it down to 10, and then we dug further. But ultimately, we did put in a full proposal for a full 2 years of funding through the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, and we're thankfully awarded that grant for implementation of 4 pilot sites, which was Bay, Genesee, Muskegon, and Grand Traverse counties. So we were doing that for the past 2 years, 2024 and 2025. And it was mostly myself and Rachel Richards, who came from Adult Protective Services, but it went particularly well in Bay County. And so Bay County was awarded 2 years of funding. And the idea is not only is it continuing what's been happening in Bay County, with the focus of legal aid and a dedicated social worker, but also trying to build a regional model, because one of the learning points was how important it is to be in person. I live in Bay City, and so it was very easy for me to just, not only would I try and pick up my calls when I can, but immediately then go see the vulnerable person directly wherever they were, whether they were in their home, in a nursing home, in the hospital, and that made a really big difference. And then just really collaborating with everyone, because it's this big safety net and we all have our roles to play, and kind of changing the culture, saying, how can I help? Like me getting to know everybody and saying like, oh, help me understand, what is it that you do? Like, what's your current system? Like, what can I help with? Like, how could we start something new? How could we do it together? That takes so much time, and each vulnerable person's situation is so unique. And I think it just became a lot more complex than we initially thought it would be. In Bay County, because of the size too, that was another important factor. I could systematically take a stab at every single potential petition. Like, can you do triages? Can you try and have some type of form where you then identifying somebody who is a good fit for more direct involvement? So I'm going to continue to do what I can during the 2 years to just kind of build momentum, learn, grow. But also, like, I need to stay in my lane regarding what the grant funder expects me to do. Like, I am a salaried employee that is getting paid to do this specific project. And there are some things, like even this meeting, that I think it's a legitimate part of the project. Part of the project is engaging in with community members about the work. But it is like specifically for Bay and trying to build like the regional model. No, so it's very much we're building the plane as we fly it. I think somebody had told me a long time ago that elder justice generally, which is an even bigger umbrella than just guardianship work, is kind of like domestic violence work was 40 years ago. We have a long way to go as a society in figuring out how to deal with, this really big problem. But I think that vulnerable adults are even like further behind, and we can do much better, all of us together, and we all need to be in it together. And so I'm just really grateful too to have a part in it, and I appreciate your interest.
Our background in general is that most every family here um, was a high net worth family who their parents were human trafficked or their estates were trafficked for profit by Michigan bar card members, and the judges and the courts colluded together to steal the parents um, and hold them hostage for ransom for money and cause vexatious litigation, because we're trying to figure out how to get at these courts with all this judicial immunity issues, how to stop all this high net worth family human trafficking that's going on. And it's not just about guardianship. My mom never needed a guardianship. She had everything, trust, wills, power of attorneys, everything, but they wanted $800,000, which is what they got, including stealing her house, which, these are the issues that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't seen yet.
Have you seen, how about, let's start with Lauren. Laura, have you seen problems like that?
So I mean, I guess generally, I know about some high conflict cases, and of course, I see them in the news every once in a while too. And before I did the guardianship diversion project, I was a legal aid attorney for a program called the Crime Victims Legal Assistance Project for Elder Abuse. So I personally did litigate on some contested cases where I was representing in court the vulnerable adult on a position. So I am a litigator, although that's not what I've been doing for the past 3 years. And I should have mentioned sooner is that because there's so much that needs improvement in trying to figure out where do we start and where do we get momentum, the initial grant and what I've been doing and what I am going to continue to do in Bay County is looking at cases before the judge finds a full guardianship, because that's the low-hanging fruit. We're trying to go like prevent it from even getting into a big giant mess, because I found that the most success that I had is trying to help solve problems in an efficient, person-centered way before a petition was even filed. And so it was the Bay County Probate Court in particular, because the numbers were low enough. If there was, a concerned family member who just calls the probate court because their deer in headlights, some well-meaning professional out there in the world said that they should get guardianship of their mom, and then they're just following instructions, they call the probate court, and the probate court says, I can't give you legal advice, but there's this free resource, call Laura. Maybe she can help you. And so then they call me and they said, I don't know, the court gave me this number. And then I explained the project to them and I say, all right, I'm not giving, this is how it works. I'm not giving you legal advice right now. The goal is to hopefully connect to the more vulnerable person. I can give them free legal advice, but, as long as you're okay moving forward, let's give me the story, let's triage, let's move forward. And so doing that early intervention has made a huge difference because, in a really high conflict situation that's high net worth and there's lots of people that are going to lawyer up, my project probably wouldn't help that much. There was one situation here in Bay County that did kind of immediately, like, there were everybody got lawyers and then they didn't really want to talk to me, so and that's okay because I think maybe I had something to do to make sure that the vulnerable person knew that they had right to a court-appointed lawyer, and I, because I've been interacting with as many partners as will listen, I think that, I'm trying to always keep this conversation about capacity for what, guardianship for what, I'm asking these questions and I'm just elevating the conversation to be more part of the dialogue. And I think that that matters even for the high conflict cases.
I think so too. The thing is that Flint is running, like other counties in southeast lower Michigan, they're just running a RICO theft ring operation for Michigan Bar Card in enrichment, and they use the person under guardianship, a false guardianship, to control the body to cause more conflict. And unfortunately, because of all this, even the Court of Appeals right now I've had cases where they just flat out say the word denied. I guess the system behind the scenes is all so corrupt through the Michigan Bar Association judges group. Is once the Bar Association member has stolen all the money from these individuals, these incapacitated supposedly individuals, and there's better plans than what they had, the Supreme Court and the Appeals Court, they go right along with this whole scam. And of course, with what's happening right now with
Tracy Cornell.
Charlie LaDuff and
Tracy
that
Cornell.
case right now, I mean, got any ideas?
We're gonna slow down because he's already at the end. I just want to still talk a little bit about your Bay County. How many Bay County? You said that Genesee had 500. How many did you have in the last 2 years?
So when I say 500 cases, I think that that's accurate off the top of my head, and maybe that includes conservatorship too. And this was back in like 2022. I think those were the numbers that I was pulling at the time when we were trying to discover the pilots. And that's information that's available on the Supreme Court case reports, just on the public websites. And then I just pulled the numbers. So I know for a fact that those were the new filings for GAs and for DD cases. And then in Bay, it was much, much lower. So it might have been even in like the 70 to 100 range. There are so many people that I interacted with, even if it was for a brief period of time, that I think still matters. And in legal aid, we're used to using a case management system, which, it's kind of like an even to open a case. You have to have all these different pieces of information, which sometimes if I'm just having a brief interaction with someone, I don't even get. Like sometimes I don't even get their name. It's not like we entered into an attorney-client relationship or I didn't give them legal advice. So there's all kinds of like little contacts that I had, whether it's with community partners, potential petitioners, other interested parties, potential respondents. And I think it all matters and it all makes a difference. But because those numbers were smaller in Bay, it meant that I could have more of those conversations before someone filed. Because sometimes, like, people really did just need help. And then if they thought, well, if nobody's giving me any answers and the only way for me to get help is to like file this paperwork to get a guardianship, then they're sort of like going down this path that they didn't need to go if they would have just gotten some better connections.
You also made a comment. Your knowledge of the guardianship prior to the program, were you like totally new to all of this, or did you know that there was the stories that we're telling you? We're back from 18, 19, 20. We've known about it for a decade. What's your major knowledge about the guardianship shenanigans?
So I became a licensed attorney in 2012, and I actually started in law school as an intern after my first year in law school as a full-time fellow at the Counsel and Advocacy Law Line, which is the almost statewide legal aid hotline through Lakeshore Legal Aid. So I was there 40 hours a week all through that summer after my 1L year, and then I stayed at the hotline all through law school. So at the hotline, it's just picking up calls from people all around the state. And of course, my role as a student changed and evolved. So that was a generalist, it's like they could ask anything under the sun that was not criminal. And, so I don't recall specifically if I had talked to somebody about a guardianship issue way back then. But then my next role, that's when I moved up to Bay County. And it was to work on a particular grant, because you also have to know all these various systems. So in legal aid, there's different grants that kind of have been happening for a long time. And one of them is through the area agencies on aging. This is through the Older Americans Act, just like you hear about home delivered meals or Meals on Wheels. So there's a tiny sliver of federal dollars that gets allocated for civil legal services to individuals. And this is shockingly like not enough. That position for Region 7, which is the 10 county service area in the Great Lakes region, that was through Lakeshore Legal Aid's Caro office. So I was the attorney, basically holding down the fort and traveling around 10 counties, just trying to be a general civil legal aid attorney for whatever walked in the door. And so, of course, a guardianship, powers of attorney came up, but I will tell you that people are generally bad about identifying their own civil legal issues. So there was a study that the Legal Services Corporation did, probably at least 10 years ago now, that I remember seeing that really had an impact on me, that said, people know when they're getting a divorce, they know if they're getting sued for a credit card debt, they know if they're getting evicted. And now seniors know, oh, I want a will, or more people know about powers of attorney. So, but other than that, they don't necessarily know what I can do for them. And so I tackle everything with my particular lens as a civil legal aid attorney, and all the tools in my toolbox that I can to help people with public benefits or deed issues, or, so when I'm issue spotting, like I'm taking what my particular knowledge, training, experience, and just trying to figure out like, oh, well, did you think about this? Or what about this problem? Like I remember, probably the biggest example is, back when I was doing that through Caro, and somebody was just calling to, get a power of attorney because they heard, oh, you call this number and you get a free power of attorney. And I always ask, like, why, why are you, why do you want this document? What are we doing? And I always wanted the full picture about what was going on, what the person's goals were, and come to find out this guy's son, who was a joint owner on his bank account, just took $20,000 because they got into a fight and figured, like he was entitled to it. So he just went ahead and took it. I'm like, well, let's talk about that. So then, I was initiating formal litigation to get the money back. But then, I just picked up the phone and called the son, and I didn't even need to file the litigation because I just resolved the issue. And so I'm just trying to be a reasonable person, and, me reasonably communicating in a, of course I was being a zealous advocate for my client, but I was also trying to have a reasonable conversation with the son. And the son immediately gave him the $20,000 back. I'm like, well, great. That took a lot less effort than filing a bunch of court paperwork and having this big fight in court. And I have dealt with these issues, but that guy didn't call me to say, can you help me get this $20,000 back? Or, that wasn't, nobody was arguing for guardianship there, but people don't necessarily know to issue spot or how to get the help. So then when I switched to the next position, which is that Crime Victims Legal Assistance Project for Elder Abuse. I was doing guardianship cases because we were then closer connected to the long-term care ombudsman. And so the long-term care ombudsman was then making referrals to me because they were interacting with residents who were potentially facing guardianship issues. So I think that's where I got most of my referrals then for guardianship, because I did, I think the first cases I did were motions to terminate or modify guardianship that had been in place, but then the person was doing better. And so I was arguing there wasn't a need for a guardianship. And I did do some representation when it was an initial petition. I remember one time I don't remember how the person got to me, but then I formally filed an objection in a pending guardianship case, and then the attorney and petitioner immediately just dismissed their petition because they didn't want to fight about it. So that was the easiest litigation case I ever did. I didn't even talk to them. When I was doing the CV-LAP elder position, my service area was a 14 county service area. So that went all the way down to St. Clair County, and then as far west as Gratiot and Clare. So it was all over. But that's another reason why I was just one person, and I have this grant that's pretty broad, and it's hard to really make any systemic impact when I'm just doing these little one-offs, and I'm not really building true relationships in each community. So it's actually been really exciting over the last couple of years to just dig in 4 counties. And oh my gosh, now I just have to do one and then try and build a plan for something that's just regional. That's actually really exciting because I felt like I was really stretched far too thin and I wasn't just doing guardianships. Now, I think that that really prepared me for the position I'm in now because it has to be holistic. And I'm just being a true advocate and I'm being an effective communicator.
How did the clerks treat you though when you went? Because you said that you started and you know, you were going around and getting numbers. How are you treated now that you were going in their territory? Did you feel like that you were stepping on toes at all, or did they treat you with respect? All the
Yeah,
other ladies.
I had awkward moments and some people were more receptive to me than others, but I had really good luck, and I think I generally started back when I was trying, I was trying to learn, right? So I said, hey, I have this grant, and I would start by going and observing. So I think I just showed up in Houghton County. Maybe I called, maybe I actually made an appointment. That would have been more reasonable to not drive all that way without an appointment. And I think I said I would love to learn more about, how the court handles guardianship. Could I observe some cases? Like, and would you have time to meet with me? And there are times where I would sometimes get um, well, if it's public, anybody can come. And then I would say, well, when do you have hearings? Like when is a good day for me to come? And, I would usually at least get out like when that day is, and then I would just go and I would just watch the public docket. I sat through the public docket in Macomb, I sat through it in a bunch of different counties. And then, usually inevitably, even if I tried to get a specific meeting and I didn't hear back, then the judge or somebody else would be like, who are you and why are you here? And then I'm just trying to be nice about it, and I'm saying, I'm doing this project, I'm here to learn, and then I would just kind of start engaging to the extent that they would engage with me. And sometimes like they didn't want to talk to me and that was okay. And other times we would start, I would just like kind of play it by ear. But I was definitely starting off in a, you know, please help me understand how you do things here. Like I was not coming in thinking I had all the answers or saying like, it's wrong. Like I'm showing up with curiosity and saying, like I've never been to the Houghton court before, and I was just curious to know how things are going. Can you tell me what some of your opinions are about this, or how my project could potentially serve you here, or suggestions, or if you had more time or more resources, what would you like to see? And it's like kind of like finding what the common ground is and seeing if there's something that you could do together. But knowing that sometimes like you can't always have the same agenda or be on the same page. So going back to the question about like how was I received, definitely in the beginning, there were people that are like, I don't know. In fact, I remember Judge Jan Miner, who is here in Bay County. I think she had gone to some conference. I don't remember which one it was. It might have been like the probate and estate planning conference or something early on. And there was somebody there that said, oh, there's people that are like out watching, court, they're observing you. And Judge Miner's like, yeah, this lady's in my court every Tuesday and it's fine, so Judge Miner was like, yeah, like I don't have anything to hide. We've actually had some really good conversations. Like, I'm happy to keep talking to her. She's welcome to watch me as much as she wants.
What is the strategy for when someone gets blindsided by it and they may not need it, but somebody wants them to be in guardianship for whatever reason?
Yeah.
And related to that, it is true that we are finding a lot of due process failures with just even at the guardian ad litem level, but also with the hearing level, the judge themselves ignoring statutes and ignoring due process. And there's a big pattern of that. And we're actually establishing that with documented evidence. But what is the strategy for avoiding even getting into court when you get blindsided?
Because I was able to have some involvement in every single case, I'll tell you how that worked, because there are different people that came to me in different ways. The vast majority of people that I interacted with were those potential pro se petitioners who, as I've heard, like 90% of the petitions that get filed often are from pro se petitioners. Those are people that are not represented by an attorney that really don't know how this system works. So I was usually first talking with somebody in that position, where somebody out there in the world mentioned the family member should get guardianship. The family member calls the probate court. The probate court says, call me. Maybe I can help. But then,
Is out there in the world like a hospital or a nursing home or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or a doctor's office, or, usually some other kind of professional. But sometimes, those potential petitioners didn't call me, but I think most of the time they did, because I think they're kind of people are used to like following directions. Now, I was also trying to spread the word amongst, the frequent filers. So the nursing homes, the hospitals. I think I've developed a pretty good relationship with the attorney that represents the McLaren Bay Hospital. And so that's been a good relationship. I also have been developing a relationship with, an attorney that represents many nursing homes. Now, we don't agree on everything, but, we've been having some really productive conversations. So there have been times where because I'm just sort of keeping tabs on all of these cases, at least at some point I was finding out about it, because the clerk, and also in Bay County, it's easier because there's just the probate register and the deputy register. So we're not dealing with that many human beings. So the judge agreed, because the judge is the one who is in charge of her staff, said, yes, for any petition that gets filed for a GA case in Bay County, they're going to send it to me. Now, sometimes they didn't and they forgot. And then I'm showing up on Tuesday and, I see on the docket there's a case and I'm like, I've never heard of this case before. Like, why didn't you send this to me? But then I'm still able to interact. So there have been times where the judge on the bench then says, oh, have you talked to Laura? No, you haven't talked to Laura. Why don't you guys either she'd pause it and we'd go talk, or it'd get adjourned. Like if the judge saw something about the case that I could potentially help with, the judge was then like in the hearing, then kind of like making a referral. So there were also times like I got referrals from Adult Protective Services, and or the Bay County Department on Aging if they were working with a client. But there were, attorneys, like sometimes private attorneys representing petitioners would call me before they filed or sometimes after they filed. But there's some petitioners, some attorneys that are like, no, like it is not a court rule. I do not have to talk to Laura. Like, no, I'm not going to talk to Laura. I'm getting paid to do a thing. So whatever. The judge can still make a referral if the judge wants to. So we all have our roles to play, and that's okay. And so to the extent that somebody wants to interact with me, they can, but the judge might make them interact with me too. But I should say, if it's a contested petition, of course, like the person can object. And I've been trying to really build good relationships with all the GALs that do this work. And some of those GALs I have good relationships with. Some of them, kind of, I could maybe have some room for improvement. But then they could make a referral to me. So if they go out and they might refer the case. But if the person wants to object, the court's going to appoint them an attorney. And I think I'm also helping to build the capacity of those court-appointed attorneys and those GALs, because, these attorneys don't really know a lot about like public benefits or how nursing home Medicaid works or the community transition program or like all this other stuff. And I try and assume best intentions, and I try and say, and to offer help. The system is just not adequately designed to do everything that it should do under statute. It is unfunded mandates in a lot of cases, and even, the guardian resources in each county is very different. Like in Bay County, we do have a nonprofit guardianship, so we're lucky in that because not everybody does. And so Catholic Family Service, which is the nonprofit here in Bay County, they're good people. I think, I don't think any of the nuns are still doing the casework, but, they are woefully underfunded. So if there's something that I can do to prevent a case from getting on their caseload, I think that that's a win-win for everybody. And, I think that they're supportive of the project too, because, there's more attention that they can give for serving the clients that really need them.
How does nonprofit guardianship work? Are they just doing it completely for free as a charity? Or is there some kind of compensation to cover their expenses? Or
I think they get funding through a variety of ways. I know that if somebody has a guardianship and they're on Medicaid and they're in a facility, what is it, $83 a month, that they get, which isn't very much, but then in Bay County, luckily, I think the way that it works is that then Bay County will pay Catholic family a flat rate, and I'm not clear on what that is right now. Somebody probably told me at some point, but I'm sure it's like woefully inadequate. Maybe it's like $100, but to try to mitigate the cost of whatever it is. But I think that whatever it is, it needs to be like way more money, especially in the beginning when there's a transition and you're trying to like help somebody who's going through some type of like either immediate crisis or upset, like, or maybe somebody does need to get on Medicaid or they need to get home and community-based services and they need to get on waiver. It takes a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of effort to do that. I'm trying to think of a way that more people can get trained to kind of do what I'm doing. And it's kind of hard because like I have this unique like background, and I can do this unique issue spotting, and I'm really struggling with how to make this all scalable and sustainable.
there aren't any booklets or anything like that that would explain alternatives to guardianship, are there?
Well,
That could be passed out to attorneys as well as the public?
so the problem, I mean, I think there are some resources out there, but frankly, I think that they're not very effective. There doesn't really help because for two reasons. One, guardianship diversion is really just about problem solving. Like, what is the problem and capacity for what? And then me trying to be an advocate to like make it happen because there's all these various assumptions that things just are the way that they are. And there's also lots of people that don't really like push back too. So as an attorney, I'm used to being an advocate and I'm used to questioning. And I don't necessarily just take somebody's word for it. And sometimes, like, everybody's in their silos too. So, Jody, I think I gave you this example, but something that does come up, and this happened to my father, who happened to have a major stroke a year and a half ago while I was working on this project. And it was very educational to like, have that front row seat to all of that. Because of course, even though I've done literally over 1,000 powers of attorney, does my father have a power of attorney? No, no, of course he does not. It is like taking the stroke example. So I've had this numerous times throughout the project where somebody just had a major stroke and it's like day 1 or day 2 or day 3 in the hospital. And the hospital has told, some family member, you need to file for guardianship. So then the family member is calling me and I'm like, whoa, we're on day 3 of a major stroke, and they told you like yesterday you need guardianship. Like, well, how's dad doing today? Like he kind of needs a minute, and so like then I'm like, okay, then we do the whole triage and then I'm asking him questions and I'm, very much like, is he able to communicate at all? Like, is he responsive at all? Can he nod his head? Can he say words? And if there's some kind of hope that like, oh, maybe they are able to communicate. Oh, and the hospital's not talking about discharge right now. Like, okay, well, let's kind of give it a minute. Why don't you give me an update? But, maybe on like day 7 or day 10, if the person's feeling up to it, I'm happy to come on up there because, the next step really is like, what's the problem to be solved? The problem to be solved is what's a safe discharge plan? And if the safe discharge plan is to go to rehab, then let's just focus on that problem. And is the person able to give informed consent to whether or not they want to go to rehab? And if so, then we're focused on that. So what happened multiple times is then like, okay, yeah, we're ready to discharge to rehab. Does the family member think that they understand that and can consent to it? Yes. So then I go up to the hospital and I'm like, who told you need guardianship? It was the case manager. So I talked to the case. So first I talked to the person and I kind of come to my own conclusion. Do I think that
Well, isn't that legal advice though?
So yeah,
Are they legally allowed to tell you you should get guardianship for your mom or your dad? They work for a hospital, they're a social worker, they're a doctor. They're saying this. We had that experience.
Yeah. So I mean, just I think that maybe they're using the words that like the nursing home won't take you unless there's a guardianship. So, but like they hear, you know, the hospital told me I need guardianship. So anyway, like I then go to the hospital, I talk directly to the vulnerable person, the family member introduces me like, hey, will you talk to Laura? Yes. Okay, here I am. And then I'm making my own judgment call about whether or not this person understands the issue of discharge to rehab and whether or not they consent to it. And then I say, hey, can I like speak to everybody on your behalf and try and help you do this? And then once you get, you know, if we can get you to the rehab, I'm sure there's a lot more to do. I'm happy to meet you there too. Sure. Okay. So then I talk to the case manager and the case manager says, it's not me giving legal advice or saying you need a guardianship. You know, it's the doctor who says the person doesn't have capacity to make any decisions. So I said, great, let me talk to the doctor. And then of course people are like, what do you mean you want to talk to the doctor? But I can be very like persistent. So then I talk to the doctor and the doctor says, it's not me, it's the nursing home. And then I said, so doctor, I'm happy to go talk to the nursing home, but you know, have you do you agree that this person can give informed consent to go to rehab? And in some cases they say, yes, I agree with that, or I don't know. And I said, great, doctor, come right in. Like we just had this conversation, witness the conversation that we just have. And then I get from the case manager, all right, because you need to know who has a bed and who takes the insurance. So maybe it's a couple places that they narrowed it down to. And then, so I said, okay, great. I'm going to go straight to, like, I'm thinking of the one example, and it was two particular places. So I say, okay, family member, let's just drive over to Carriage House. So we drive over to Carriage House. We say, is your admission person available? No, they're not available. Okay, can you have them give me a call? And then we drive the mile down the road to Bay Shores, which was the second one. Is your admission person available? And we talk, and I relay, the status of the individual, the conversation I have with the doctor. Will you take them? And then the admission person is saying, well, are they a full code or not? I said, I don't know. I haven't discussed that issue with them. I'm happy to try and discuss that issue with them. But unless then you have to try and resuscitate them unless you know otherwise. Isn't that fine? Like, yeah, that's fine. Okay. And they said, well, could you have the doctor give an updated note saying the doctor thinks that this person can give informed consent to go to admit to the rehab? I'm like, sure, that's fine. So then the doctor sends the updated note and then they admit him. And it was really just like, it took a lot of time to just kind of like get everybody. And so having on a brochure, like, just don't file for guardianship. It's really, it's about narrowing in what's the immediate problem to be solved, capacity for what, and then in a person-centered way, meeting the person where they are, trying to effectively communicate with them in a non-complex, like in-person way. Like,
I thought this was a meeting about trying to remove judges, and the other issue is, I don't know everybody's case personally, but I don't think anybody in here had a case like you're speaking about where someone had a stroke and they I don't think anybody in here's loved one actually needed a guardian. The issues that I thought we were going to be discussing are basically fraudulent guardianships like Randy's and Tom's and Cynthia's, and everybody in here has had problems where their parents have been legally kidnapped. Not people that had a disability, not people that actually needed help. People that were just kidnapped so their money could be stolen, their estates could be stolen. That's what I thought we were talking about.
So Randy, those have been the past meetings. We just wanted to take a little bit of a break and bring Laura in and to talk about it. So I apologize. Next week we'll continue because we're all trying to get rid of the judges. That's our goal, is to impeach the judges. But hey, Laura, you being an attorney, I think that's one of the things that we're very frustrated at. Like, we love that
my mom is dead because of this guardianship.
Pardon?
It's beyond frustration.
Well, and Randy, you lost your mom a year ago, so and you are one of the longest families here that have been in it. But Laura, as an attorney, that you claim it's woefully you said underfunded. Well, all of us were kind of underfunded. We were all kind of naive, and we went into the system with our problem solving ideas, asking questions, because every one of us were naive when it happened. And this is the group that's probably getting the comments when you go to the judges associations, like there's those people. And we have been all doing this at least since 2021. So I apologize for us kind of attacking you, because we are angry, we are angry. And that's why I asked you about, as an attorney, you maybe knowing the judges, are they at all saying maybe some of these advocates that have been through it have a right to be upset? As an attorney, do you guys kind of see our point of view? No.
Yeah, and I think and there's bad actors in anything, every profession, every situation, and there's horrible situations. And the more that I want to know your stories, because even though I'm trying to, get that low-hanging fruit that maybe wouldn't have mattered for any of your particular situations, I think it all is still connected, and I think it all still matters. And I think knowing why this work is important, because there is abuse in guardianship. There are problems with due process in guardianship. There's not enough paid support to give people what they need. And if you don't have a family member that's able to try and advocate for you, or you don't know how to get your own help, it's really hard. So even if somebody is able to say, no, I object, I want an attorney, and whether they're able to hire their own attorney or they get a court-appointed attorney, and how effective that attorney is in then being an advocate, that can be really hard. When somebody is my client, I do the best that I can for my client. And the more that I can share what I've learned by doing this dedicated work with attorneys that do this work, I want to spread that effectiveness to try and prevent things from going way, way, way down a road that they should never go.
Do you have attorneys though that are, there's 3,400 probate and estate attorneys in the state bar. Are they trying to host this stuff? I mean, have you ever been able to speak at that function and maybe enlighten these attorneys, especially now that you've met us, all of us? We don't want to constantly tell you our stories, but I'm sure we're not the only ones. But we would like to see someone like you go and educate these attorneys, tell them to knock it off.
I think these attorneys are a major part of the problem. I've talked to several of them that were afraid to go into probate court, to go up against the judge, because they're like, I've got to deal with these people every day, and I don't want to piss all these people off. So you've got a bunch of either attorneys that are scared to do the right thing, or you've got attorneys that are just incompetent or crooked. So the lawyers are a big part of the problem. I'm not saying that you are, but there's a lot of problems with the lawyers and the judges and the guardians. My mom's guardian was also a lawyer. She was also my mom's conservator. So you've got this whole ring of corrupt people that are lawyers and judges, mostly lawyers, because the judges are also lawyers. So you've got this ring of people that are all in cahoots with each other that are going to just do what they want. And that's the other thing I kept hearing. The judge is a judge. He can do what he wants. No, the judge has to follow the law. And that's the problem, is they think they are above the law and they can do what they want. And if these people are nothing but cash cows, he kept asking, why don't you have a lawyer? Why don't you have a lawyer? Me and my sister, Debbie, where's your lawyer at? All that judge wanted was another lawyer involved. My mom's whole estate went to legal fees. The guardian ad litem, who should have been removed after they finally appointed my mom a lawyer, kept asking after every case, can I stay on, Your Honor? Can I stay on? She'd make $2,000 every time there was a hearing. And she did nothing but write a couple-page report and get $2,000. And she would go along with whatever. When we were trying to remove the court-appointed guardian, she fought for that court-appointed guardian to stay in place. When the judge says, oh, we're going to remove her and make this person the guardian, then she went along with that. And then when we tried to remove my brother from being the conservator, she was all for that. He's doing a bad job. But then when the judge said, no, I'm not going to remove him, she went along with that. So she just changes with whatever she has to do to stay on the case so she can get paid. As much as my mom
just described everybody's case pretty darn well.
And yeah, I would like to affirm that too.
If there's a possibility, if anything you take from this, Laura, is that we are wondering, maybe instead of doing a pamphlet for the public, maybe consider doing a pamphlet for your own profession, because I think you've got the clout that can go in and work on these 3,400 people. So that's all I wanted to say. Randy.
And I think what Randy and Tom and pretty much all of us are saying here is that there are so many people who appear to be willfully violating the law and willfully violating due process in order to enrich themselves, or if in the case of a judge, to enable enrichment by these fiduciaries. What is the path? What is a realistic path that we can follow for accountability? When this happens, the ward is too old, or they're too cut off from their money, or they're too cut off from communications or visitation in order to be able to even find an attorney, let alone have the money to do it, because all their money is tied up with the fiduciaries, and they won't help them. They won't let them get a lawyer to try to fight it. How does one get justice in a circumstance like that?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to beef up and talk to whoever I can. So I can give presentations and talk to other people. And in fact, I think I shared with Jody that I have that Judge Minor, I think, has secured Judge Minor and I a spot to speak to the Michigan Probate Judges Association conference in June about the guardianship diversion project. So that's only an hour. I'm kind of nervous about it because that's a pretty big deal to have this captivated attention for a whole hour, and how am I going to make use of it? What am I asking those judges to do, and how do I but I want to get to the GALs. I want to have something to offer the GALs. I want to have something to offer attorneys that do work in guardianship. Or maybe we can create some better tools for guardian ad litems or for judges to try and improve some of these due process issues, because I totally agree that there's a lot of room for improvement. So I do want to be talking with my colleagues and with judges about how to improve that, and not even expecting them to do any of the problem solving about how to actually get to the heart of whatever is going on with the facts, because most judges and lawyers know nothing about Medicaid or communicating with a vulnerable adult. But to the extent that I can to improve those true due process concerns, I hear you both.
What about the conflict of interest? We have guardians ad litem who one day they're a GAL and recommending someone to guardianship for one of their buddies, and the next day the buddy is the GAL recommending guardianship for that person. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Shouldn't that not be allowed?
As far as conflict of interest, yes, of course, that's something that's important to be mindful of, that there's really only so many people that handle these cases. Now, I don't know the situation you're talking about, because there certainly are completely inappropriate relationships and legitimate conflicts of interest. So I think it's all up to all of us to know what the rules are. And if you see something, say something, and try and just prevent those things from happening, and also having more well-trained, non-conflicted attorneys, because if there's even an appearance of impropriety, then there should be somebody else that can take the position.
If they're crooked, all the pamphlets and all the speaking in the world isn't going to change them. They're crooked. They're crooked. They're crooked. You can't change them by giving them knowledge. They're just plain crooked.
We're the public. We don't know that.
Well, I mean, my mom,
minding the store.
The person that allegedly abandoned, as far as where you brought up something about people getting paid $83, my mom's first guardian, who was court appointed, Mary Rowan, bragged about how she only got $60 a month to be my mom's guardian. Okay, she got $60 a month for my mom to be her guardian. She had 1,400 wards. Do the math. 1,400 wards getting $60 a month. That's a lot of money for doing nothing and saying, oh, I'm only getting $60.
Caseloads are very important, and I certainly agree that there needs to be some limits on how many cases any one person can reasonably manage, because part of my problem is, I feel like I wasn't very effective in Genesee because it was too big. It was too much for me to be able to really handle.
And Randy, and both Randys, Laura, that's if this meeting alone, just the fact that you heard both of them, that's our cry. If there's any way you could bring the pamphlets to the attorneys, that would be a blessing.
Pamphlets aren't going to do anything, Jody.
Well,
if they're crooked,
she can
you're not
try,
going to
though. Laura can try. And Laura, we know that there's 43,000 attorneys. You're one of them. And again, like Randy Asplin said, we the public, we didn't know we were going to be had.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. You're actually describing a social work skills. So I just was curious to know, like, where did that background come from?
Yeah, well, I think as a legal aid attorney, I'm like social work adjacent, and also like I'm doing the best that I can when I can. And so my boundaries are terrible. And there have been times where I'm like just doing a thing because what else is going to happen? Like, oh, in order for my client not to get evicted, it means me getting in the car right now and driving 40 minutes in order to deliver a check from like my client's apartment to the bank across the street, like by 5 o'clock. Otherwise, this is all going to fall apart. And I just do it out of necessity. I've learned a lot of social work stuff because there wasn't a social worker available to do the thing. And then also trying to make friends with social workers to learn like, and also ask them like, how can you help, social worker? And then me trying to do what I can do. So I guess I've just sort of like learned over the years because I'm very much trying to learn about what can help my clients. And yeah, sometimes I end up doing social worky kind of stuff. But we all got to work together.
The problem with the current state court system is that the counties throw the money over the wall into the court system, and then the courts operate independently from the county. Even though it says county, Bay City County, or Genesee County court system, it truly is not Genesee County court system. It's really the state of Michigan court system of Genesee County. And the Supreme Court Office of Administration controls all the oversight of all the court employees, except for in probate, and except for the one office, which is the clerk of the court in the circuit court, district courts. They belong to the county clerk. Probate's a state court, an independent court, separate from all other courts. And if you appeal from a probate court, since all courts are inferior to circuit court, except in this case, since it was an illegal fake court that was enacted by a legislature without state constitutional authority, to appeal to the appeals court, because it's not a county court, it's a state court. And the state owns all those employees. And under the Monell document, you can't even sue the county for their lack of oversight, even though they fully funded something they have no physical control over. And so these judges all know this scam that's in the system that's set up. And truly, the only person you might be able to sue is the lawyer, but since they're so crooked, getting at their finances would be almost impossible. I had 3 trust cases, none of which were bonded by the clerk of the court, which is one of the requirements under the Register of Actions by the state court. The issue is it's being so difficult. Once you get into these crooked courts, they know the system's so broken, there's no remedy for any possible person to go after them. It's really great that what you're doing to prevent it up front in the first place, and that's absolutely the highest priority going forward, is preventing it going forward. We proposed a thing for the legislature to put in a new law for restitution fund for all the fraud that's happened in the past years in these courts, for all these victims across the state, and there's thousands of them. The judicial system is completely broken in this state. I was just talking to my other attorney about it, and he's having the same problems. Once these people steal people's money, the Michigan court system don't want to hear from them. They don't even want to hear from lawyers who want to bring these cases forward. So it's a good thing what you're doing. We're just trying to figure out a plan of how to get restitution out of these people.
There's a lot of potential, problems. And of course, as far as, what's appealable, when it's appealable, the best strategy to try and get a goal, as a lawyer, it's all about, if I have the problem, if, like, for example, if I was tasked to try and get restitution for someone, or whatever their goal trying to was, like, then it's my job as a lawyer to say what, not only know the case, like what's the history of the case, what are the facts, my client, what do they want, what's the law, what's the applicable law, what's my avenue, have we there's certain time limits for things like, can we go this way? Do we have another option? Can we go at it somewhere else? You know, like, could we go after a different person? And some of the systems really just are very, very hard.
We would love to have you come back with a different attitude. Because one thing that Julie made a very clear point, you're kind of more like a social worker. You're not really an attorney because your attitude and your work habits, you're caring and concerned, unlike the attorneys that we've all worked with. Are you able to maybe come back another time and let us kind of vent a little bit? We'll all take our 15 minutes just so you could hear our side of it because of where you're at with it. It would be nice if some attorney cared about it, you know.
Yeah, I'm happy to listen. I think that that's very important for me to know about like what's out there and what people have experienced. So yes, I would be happy to come back and hear more about your stories or you know, like I'm open to doing it in different ways.
There's Randy last month, he told us to call this lady out of New York. She's doing a study. She's a doctor and of course a social worker because the social workers care about the issues and how to resolve it, unlike an attorney that they make funding if they just keep us all in conflict. So that lady, if you called, and she gave my husband almost 3 hours, and it was almost like rewarding for my husband because the lady never cut him off. He was able to get his story out, and she cared about the story. And we would love to have attorneys do that for us and do a study on us victims because we're all shocked what happened to us. And like I said, Randy Robinson is one of the longest ones that this has happened to, and he's still fighting. He's still trying to go out and make change. We're trying to meet with people like you who you want change, you want it to be better. So
yeah, and if there's something that you want to send me, like if you already have sort of like a summary that you've sent to like a bunch of people and you want me to just read it, like not only read a summary, but then also have like a 20-minute conversation, because I think it really does help to understand like what you're coming from and help me to think through like, well, what can I do in my role and with this grant? And where are the opportunities when I'm interacting with members of the private bar to maybe like help nudge where I can, receive from you what did happen to try and like help like craft.
Well, and Laura, all of us have gone to the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. All of us have. So, and we don't even do it with attorneys anymore because none of us have any money left. So, but we have become friends with attorneys that do care. We have a small handful that are trying like you would be trying. So anytime we can get an attorney to care about it, and we already know you are doing it though more like a social worker, and it's obvious you're being so successful because of the way you're doing it. Most attorneys, I don't think like you. They're not doing it as a social working mentality, like you're doing. So that's my observation.
So I am a member of the elders section of the state bar. That's the elder law and disability rights section. And so many of those attorneys do guardianship work as well. And so I am an active member in that. They always have a fall conference. I go to the fall conference. I talk a lot. So if there's ever a time where I can like ask a speaker a question or say something about guardianship, I do. So that's a very good group of attorneys. And I think that, that's kind of an easier audience than the larger probate bar, where maybe some of those attorneys are really they don't really do guardianship litigation, or maybe they do more of like the wills and the powers of attorney. But frankly, as somebody who also does wills and powers of attorney, it makes me very nervous when there's attorney doing those documents that don't know all the other big picture stuff. I love how the elder section and, kind of these elder law attorneys, like who know about Medicaid and know about these more complex issues, know about guardianship. It matters when you're trying to give any legal advice when you ask the questions like I did of that guy whose son took $20,000, like, why do you want to change your will? Like, oh, let's talk about that, because there's usually something else going on too. So, but yeah, with the elder section of the private bar, I do have good relationships with them, and I've already been kind of, standing on my soapbox with that group, and I will continue to do so.
Is it a good idea for attorneys, probate attorneys to also be professional guardians?
Like somebody who's a general like private attorney and they draft wills and they do work for some people and then they serve as guardians for other people. Like the ethics of being an attorney, like who is my client and like, you know, what loyalty do I have to them and what is my role serving this individual? So I could, you know, draft a will for one person and serve as a fiduciary or a guardian for another person. I don't think there's an inherent conflict in that.
You're a probate attorney, you are appointed as a guardian for some stranger, and the ward's relatives start catching you doing things that you shouldn't be doing. But you're a probate attorney, you're an officer of that court. And how is that family going to come to the rescue of their loved one when the court is just going to automatically presume that everything you say as a probate attorney is going to be gospel truth? Or the judge just wants to make nice with one of their colleagues and the family are just going to have to deal with it. How is that not a conflict of interest?
Well, I mean, I've worked very hard for my credibility, and I think that I can get things done for my clients because of the credibility that I've built. You know, and you know, an attorney's credibility can be destroyed, you know, very easily, you know, and you have to be very careful not to. So, of course, like I believe in like our system, and you know, like I think there's so much room for improvement, but I work within the system that exists. And so like if anybody objected, you know, of course I would want, you know, whoever needs representation to get representation. And I, as a legal aid attorney, I want there to be more access for people to have resources like me, because I just get a salary, you know, I don't get paid hourly or anything like that. And so I would want if like, you know, somebody wanted to object, or if, you know, the vulnerable person wanted to object, and then that vulnerable person can then, you know,
I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that a lot of us believe that the root of the problem with the corruption within the court system, within the probate court system, stems directly from the fact that the judges are appointing probate attorneys as professional fiduciaries. They're covering it for each other, and anybody who doesn't go along with it gets retaliated against. My attorney got retaliated against for doing that. The judge sat there knowing perfectly well that the attorneys who were the fiduciaries were lying and bringing false witnesses to come and testify, and the judge did nothing about it.
I mean, I don't serve as anyone's guardian, but like if that's something that I don't know, I think that if what you just told me, you were telling me that somebody like made clear misrepresentations of fact, or that they had knowledge, you know, that's not something that like, you know,
It's common. It's very common in all of these cases.
So this like the ethics and the statutes that we have like are supposed to protect against that. And you know, I mean, I think that I mean, I'm sorry that you know, that if
That's where we come back to accountability and judicial immunity. It sets up the perfect crime under an immunity system where you've got such holes in statutes that the judge can just basically do whatever they want to. And even then, they can still ignore the statutes without getting busted. No one does anything about it. And some of us have complained bitterly to law enforcement, to other attorneys. We've brought forth evidence of it, evidence where we can show that the judge himself is literally fabricating things out of whole cloth and putting them down on the record. And yet nobody does anything about it, including the JTC. I mean, how do we cope with that? What's a strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a good answer for you right now, Randy. I mean, I do want to learn more about your story too, but like if I'm somebody who ever encountered somebody who wasn't being ethical or wasn't following the law, like I personally have a duty to report that to the Attorney Grievance Commission. you know, and that's
They
something.
would do absolutely nothing is the point he's making.
Yeah,
That grievance commission would do absolutely nothing. Same with the judicial tenure committee. They would do absolutely nothing because they all got each other's back. You know, they're all
it
just a bunch
sounds far-fetched, but Randy's absolutely right. And it's not just speculation, it's not sour grapes, it's that really go very far, violating our state laws and customs. And we don't know how to change the culture of that so that people can be protected.
I've got documented proof of perjury with my mom's first guardian, Mary Rowan. And then she asked the cops to please fax that report to her so she could enter it into the probate court record. And I got a copy of that. It never got entered. So that's withholding evidence. And it's perjury because she told the judge personally in the court. So it's written perjury and verbal testimony perjury. And I can't get anybody to do anything about it. This woman needs to be in jail before she dies. They weren't concerned about my mom. And then they stole more money. So the whole thing was nothing but crime on top of crime and crooks helping them out so that those crooks could also profit. The whole system has got to be flushed down the toilet. It doesn't work. It can't work because everybody that's involved in it is a crook.
But Laura is going to do her program and she is going, well, and again, Laura, he's 100% right. Ted, Tom, Cindy, Randy. I mean, we all have the same story. April, it all starts with a nefarious family member, but they had an attorney helping them. So I think it's just really cool because I forget you're an attorney because you are so not like the attorneys we've been dealing with. But
We got all these issues going on, and so the state bar has what I consider two monster criminals on the board of directors up front. And so our issue is bigger. This is a private membership association. State bar is a private membership association, but since they've infiltrated the state government in every aspect with having a Michigan bar card attorney involved in every judicial appointment. So they've taken over a third of our government. This private organization's taken over a third of our government illegally. And now they've infiltrated all of the executive branch and in about a third of the legislative branch. So we've got this monster problem here where it's all about the bar. We've actually tried to impeach judges, and they said, we've talked to our legal counsel for the Republican Party, for the House of Representatives, and they said, we advised against that. That's what they told the actual congressperson, is we advise you not to do that. So this issue here is getting bigger and bigger.
Scott Teeter ain't no good either.
Yeah, I know, him too. I think he's probably gone with Dana Nessel at the end of the year.
I don't think so. I think we're still.
He was there before
Dana.
That these people are not upstanding people like the judge that you have in Bay County. From everything I heard you say, you know, I mean, I wish Jeannie Barkey in Genesee County. Jeannie Barkey, in my opinion, belongs in Jackson State Penitentiary. She's running a RICO theft ring operation there. And I can see why you had no, you know, substantial, you know, improvement in what happened in Flint, because they're all in there robbing people. It's tough to get help, but your group at the state bar through this elder group, I mean, maybe that's a good avenue for a discussion on this, because it's ruining your profession is what is going on here, in especially Southeast Lower Michigan, Kent County, and all these usually large community areas, unlike Bay City, which is smaller. So
people are becoming afraid of getting into guardianship.
Yeah, you can't even afford to even get involved in it because it's such a criminal outfit. We're constantly telling people, do anything to stay out of it. It's a tough reach to get into these people to get any relief, because you can't get it against the county. So they've committed, like Randy said, the perfect crime. And so keeping people out of this in the first place is absolutely, what you're doing is phenomenal. And that's really the best defense until we can come up with a complete overhaul of this system. Because
thank you for that, Tom. And I, you know, I want to talk to whoever will talk to me. So if Judge Murkowski will talk to me, you know, great. You know, I because I want to build, like, find common ground and sort of like move forward and ask people for very specific things and try and get their buy-in on a path towards improving the system. I want to comment on Cynthia. So, the first part of your comment about what can we do when we call for help and we're told you have to be indigent or the person you call themselves. That's by calling through like legal aid. So in legal aid, most legal aid organizations, it has to be directly the person who wants the advice. Like, I've tried to do workarounds because I'm trying to be accommodating to maybe a barrier that somebody's having, or I try and work with like, okay, I'm talking with the person. How can you help me connect to the vulnerable person directly, which is what I'm doing, because I have to give the advice directly to the vulnerable person, but I'm using whoever the community partner is or the family member to connect me to that person. So I definitely think that my colleagues in legal aid could do better about trying to make that available. But yeah, in legal aid, we do have a variety of grants. And right now, thankfully, the grant that I'm working in doesn't have any income or asset requirements. And so sometimes legal aids do have, they get to set what they call their priorities, like kind of cases that they think might be the most impact. So maybe they decide we're going to focus on these kinds of cases because we can't do everything for everyone. And it can be really hard. So yes, I do think the system is generally underfunded. If I could get more pots of money for me to kind of keep doing this work, or try and like build the pipeline and help train new attorneys to do some of the work that I'm doing so that it's more affordable, it's available, like I would very much like to make that happen.
When I initially contacted you, it was because we were trying to get the legislators to get behind the pilot program to make it available to all of Michigan. And so we were trying to present legislation to them, and we used your pilot program and then our personal situations to try to say, this is what would need to be done, added to it so that it would protect, so people wouldn't end up in the guardianship problems that our families have ended up in. And I had asked like if there was an intake form, but what do you see that is that a possibility that it could be like part of EPIC?
I guess I'm just so far from like trying to come up with a pitch about something that would work on a larger scale that I don't know, because in me being effective, I was most effective in Bay, given, all those other factors that I mentioned. So I think it's hard to make a pitch right now for not only a protocol, but then also funding it. When I don't even have it.
We used Tom Boyd's funding where he had been at another meeting where he was cutting funding. So we used his ideas and how to come up with the funding for the program. But it's hard to get the legislators behind us to do it. But it would cut out a lot of money because these guardianships cost a lot of money too.
Oh, thank you for
Laura,
that.
have you ever met anybody? All of us have lost seriously over $1 million. We're like the big ticket people. Do you see that at all? Have you run into any of us complaining about how heavy we're complaining in the 3 years that you've been pretty active?
I think I know that when the Attorney General did some listening sessions, like I went to the listening session in Flint, and so I don't recall specifically if one of you were there, but
Victoria
I think
McCasey was there about a tree farm.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that, but she basically yelled at Dana because she's dead. The stress killed her. So it's horrible. But and Tom, you were in Flint, right?
I was there. They wouldn't let me speak on purpose.
Well, because we were following her. All of us were following her because I know they don't like our group because we're the ones constantly making requests for reform. Well, thank you, Laura, for coming.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for showing up today. I think this was a very productive meeting, and we'd like to invite you back maybe in a couple months, and hopefully you might be able to do some one-on-ones with us.
Sounds good. Thank you so
Laura,
much.
thank you. Okay,
Thank
good
you
night,
very much.
everyone.